So I'm here today with Stuart Morley from Insure It Angels Insurance, and Stuart's agreed to have an interview with me, mainly just to give a bit of information to roofers about insurance. And I know a lot of roofers I know already work with Stuart, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to pick his brains from a roofer's perspective about what's needed. What cover do you need? Where are you most at risk if your cover's wrong? Those types of things. So thanks very much, Stuart. I know you're a busy man, so I
No problem.
appreciate the time.
Yeah, it's okay.
So yeah, I thought I'd start by just asking about what your background in roofing insurance is, really, because I know you've done it for quite some time, haven't you?
Yeah, my background is insurance broker for 35 years. I've worked on international broking for international brokers on international construction projects. But at heart, I was brought up on in Hartlepool in Teesside, where subcontracting is basically the way forward and the way of life. And for the last 5 years, I've just been specialising really in contractors' liability insurance, mainly roofers and scaffolders.
Yeah,
Just and I now provide broking services to over 450 roofing companies, from one-man band up to 30-man companies.
yeah. So you can sort of offer cover for all different sized firms, then, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. From a one-man band setting up without any hot works, just needing the basic public liability, up to very complicated contractually difficult companies to put insurance in place, where it is really important that the cover is right.
Yeah.
And it's more the cover than the price at that end. Although price is obviously a big factor, it's
Yeah,
making sure that
but
cover is
they've really got to get their ducks in a row, kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So why do we roofers and general contractors require public liability? What's the sort of the main crux behind it?
Public liability is there to protect the roofer from claims made by members of the public, right?
Yeah.
That's for bodily injury and for property damage. You have to bear in mind that as a roofer, you cannot make a claim on your public liability policy. It is there to protect you from claims by other people against you.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called a third party liability policy.
And vice versa, I presume it's there to protect the public from your contracting work as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because a lot of the time you won't get work if
Yeah.
you're not insured. That's part of the reason why you should have the cover, is it allows you to go onto tender lists, to work with larger contractors, to work on schools and hospitals, and work with architects, because they're all going to want to make sure that you've got cover in place if you're being recommended as part of the job.
Yeah, it's literally the bare minimum industry standard, isn't it? You know.
Yes. If you want to go to any of the trade groups where you're audited and they provide services where they are recommending a certain trades and certain contractors, they will all make sure that you've got public liability in place.
Yeah, it's exactly the same with the Association of Master Roofers. I mean, it's one of the first things that we look at with the office.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they haven't got their insurances in place, it's alarm bells straight away, isn't it?
Yes, and I think it's a point of difference between you and the contractor that doesn't have it in place.
Yeah,
because at least you can give comfort to your clients that if something goes wrong, at least you've got cover in place.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure this one will be a long question. What are the common myths and misconceptions you find when you're talking to roofers about buying cover?
The biggest one is the belief that a contractor who has 3 or 4 guys working with them are covered through their public liability for injuries suffered by those other guys who are self-employed.
Right. So what you're saying is if you've got subbies,
Yeah.
even if those subbies have their own public liability insurance, if they're working for you, they're working under your insurance.
If they're working for you and under your control, and you're in control of the job, and you're paying them, you're providing the materials, you're telling them when to turn up, what to do and how to do it, from an insurance point of view, they're exactly the same as if they were on the books, and therefore would be an employer's liability claim. And your public liability would exclude claims from those people.
Yeah.
So
And
you'd be left high and dry.
the cover that you offer, does it have employer's liability within it?
You can, it's a combined liability policy generally that we would recommend where people have employees. Yeah. There are certain groups of companies that don't, by law, have to take employers' liability insurance out. So that would be sole traders, where they employ people, but those are only direct members of the family.
Yeah.
Right? Then you don't have to carry employers' liability insurance. But if you're if you are a sole trader and you have a labourer who's coming to work for you, right? Even if he's got his own public liability insurance because he does jobs on his own occasionally, right? When he's working for you as your labourer, he's employed by you.
Yeah.
Right? There is a requirement that you take out employer's liability insurance.
Yeah. If this might be a bit of a complicated one, but I'm sure you'll know the answer. If I'm a slating and tiling company, I currently don't have any insurance for hot works because I don't do any welding, I don't do any torch on.
Yep.
I get a job and there's a lady on the job and she says, look, I've been thinking about getting this lead roof done. And I think to myself, right, well, I know a guy who can do lead welding. I'll give him a ring. I'll put my money on top of his price and I'll do the work through this. He does the work through me.
Yep.
Do I need to have hot works on my
Yes.
public liability?
Simple answer, yes, you do.
Yeah.
Because in the event that there's an incident, your client isn't bothered at all whether you've subbed that out, right? And if if it's part of your contract, they will sue you.
Yeah.
Right? Now, you may well have said to the guy he's got to cover it, and that's fine, but there's no guarantee that he hasn't done something that breaches his insurance policy, or that he hasn't paid his insurance premium. Right? Because just because he's got a piece of paper doesn't mean he's actually insured.
Yeah.
So in that event, you would need to instruct your insurers that you are subbing that work out, right? So you have a contingent liability, right? But your policy will also state that you have to have a copy of your subcontractor's public liability insurance.
Yeah.
So anybody that does hot works and subs it out, right? I would still prefer that their insurer was made aware that the hot works were on site, although being done by a subcontractor, so that in the event that there is incidents that aren't insured, your policy will still protect you.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
If you're only getting a lead worker to pop out and do a chimney back like 3 times a year, is it a case that I could ring you and say, listen, Stuart, I don't do any hot works, but next week a guy is coming out to weld on site.
Yeah.
Can I pay an additional premium for next week?
Yeah, no, I think what we'd be doing is if he was coming out and you weren't sure when he was coming out and he was bringing all his own gear, he would be cast as a bona fide subcontractor, right?
Yeah.
It's his responsibility. You're paying him for his work, his job, right? Then, and you're subbing that element out, you're protected by his policy, hopefully, right? You would just say to the insurer, right, we've got an element of hot works that's been subbed out, and they would note their policy just in case. But I wouldn't do it as and when.
Yeah.
That would be part of my renewal discussions with the client to make sure that their cover's right from the start.
Yeah, so you wouldn't just try and bolt it on next.
No, it's easier and cheaper to do it as part of the renewal.
With you.
Right. In the same way that extending your public liability policy from 2 million to 5 million is cheaper to do it at renewal than it is to potentially do it halfway through the year when you have to buy a separate policy.
Yeah.
So there are times when that's unavoidable, right? And there are times where, I've won a contract that I wasn't expecting to win, but they want 5 million quid's worth of cover, and we increase the limit at that point.
Yeah. So you can sort of adapt and change as you go along if necessary.
The thing is, it's very difficult to then go back down in terms of your liability limit, because that contract, you could still attract claims from that contract for the next 3 years or so. So that's why you've got to, once you go up to 5 million from 2 million, you've got to stay there.
Yeah. Yeah. So what factors then, you know, if you're adding hot works, if you're adding working at certain heights and stuff, obviously it's all this stuff is adding to the premium, isn't it? The amount of people. So what factors are there that contribute to that final cost, you know, the total of your premium for the year?
Probably when discussing with an underwriter, there's probably at least 20 different factors go into what will create the final rate for that client. And then that rate is applied to their public liability and the employer's liability, the turnover and wage roll to create the premium. So things you're looking at are the location where you are. People wouldn't really think about that, but it's a lot more expensive for a claim in London than it is in Scunthorpe.
Yeah.
No disrespect to Scunthorpe, but generally it is just more expensive for labour and materials in London than it is for labour and materials in Scunthorpe.
Yeah. So putting the work right is going to cost more money.
It's going to cost you more. So claims will be higher. So the premium rate is increased. So
makes sense.
So that's in there. Whether you're doing hot works, but there's different categories of hot works. So if you're doing torch on, right, that's the highest category, right? If you're doing lead welding, it's not as high as torch on felt, so you charged a lower rate, right? And then if you're doing hot air, then you charged a different rate again. Now those people would say, hot air isn't really working with heat. You and I would say differently, because we know that there are examples of houses being burnt down through the application of heat guns.
I was on one 4 years ago. A house burnt down, hot air gun peeling paint off of the side.
Paint off, absolutely. So we know that it creates enough heat to cause a problem. Things like, also, are you working on new build? Are you working on heritage properties? There's a massive difference between those. Right? If you're working on if you're working on a listed building, when a claim occurs, the building has to be put back as though nothing happened, using the same materials. Yeah. Whereas if you're working on a new house, you can basically knock up a new house quite easily and choose the different materials. The height that you work to. If you're working on domestic properties and do no more than 10 meters, you're a much better risk than somebody who's working on 25-meter properties, because obviously the danger is more. But on those, the counter argument to that is, as you get higher up, the health and safety becomes far more important. The safety factors become more important, because you have fall nets. You might be fully scaffolded. You might be fully nested in.
Yeah.
So all of those factors are in there. We have things like, are you working off access platforms? Are you working off scaffold? Are you just working off ladders?
Yeah, which again, they're all higher risk, I presume.
Yeah. Do you ever take any unlicensed asbestos off? Right? Do you declare to your insurer that you are taking the odd asbestos cement tile off a roof? Right? Because your policy will exclude that. Liability arising from that will be excluded unless specifically included. So that would increase the cost. Are you have you got health and safety in place? Have you got a written health and safety policy? Do you do risk assessments and method statements? Right? Those aren't legal requirements until you are employing 5 people or more. Right? But it's a huge risk factor to an insurer. If they know that you take health and safety and risk assessments and method statements seriously, right, you will get a better rate than somebody who says, no, I'm not interested.
So would you say then that even if you're a one-man band with, one lad giving you a hand, is it worth putting in place your RAMs in order to lower your premium?
Absolutely. Personally, I think it is. And the thing is, at that stage, it's not difficult to do it.
Yeah, it's quite easy. Yeah,
to attract a better rate. There are a number. I mean, we can assist. We can arrange free access to health and safety programs. Right? That's not an issue. People just are too busy. That's the thing. And I would have said you're never too busy to make sure you're protected at work, especially when you're a sole trader and you've got a mortgage to pay. And if you slip off a roof and you're injured, right, and you can't work, right, you also then probably can't pay your mate either, right? I think it's really important that health and safety is from the ground up, from when you first start, you do it, because you obviously, a lot of people go into it wanting their companies to grow. So you're going to have to do it at some point, right? So you might as well do it because it's really, really good business practice. That's the simple factor.
Yeah.
Insurers are interested because you are showing that you are diligent when it comes to risk. And if you can prove that through your health and safety policy and your risk assessments, you will get a better rate. That's it.
So I take it then cheap isn't necessarily always best.
Well, you could pretty much go down that with any trade, any industry. Because would you say the cheapest car was as good as the best car? No.
But it's more about the quality of the cover than the cost of the premium, I presume.
Well, the quality of the cover is really important when you are bidding for certain types of work. It's important that if you're working for a main contractor, they will have a questionnaire that you have to complete as a subcontractor, and it will have all the details, and it'll be asking whether you have indemnity to principal, as in will the main contractor be indemnified if something happens through your policy? Yes. Do your help works in place? What's the height limit on your policy? And the cheap policies, whilst there may be absolutely nothing wrong with them, right, tend not to be flexible in what you need to do. So it might be absolutely ideal for you that when you take it out, and a month down the road, you pick up a contract, right, that they can't take on.
Yeah,
because they only took it on because you said you were doing 2-story houses.
Yeah.
Now you've got a school.
Yeah.
Right, or a hospital. So there is an element of, and again, I go through that when I'm talking to people right at the outset, is that I will ask them what they expect to do for the next 12 months. What they did last year isn't really important to me. It's what they're going to do for the next 12 months, because that's what the policy will be based on. And if you know that you've got a contract coming up for a housing association, right, that are going to ask you for your indemnity limits to be increased, then you need to be with an insurer who can cope with those.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I've spoken to roofers before where they've got their insurance online, and I've said to them, "Oh, it's a nightmare, isn't it, when you've got to answer all the questions?" And they're like, "Well, I didn't answer hardly any, actually. I think I only had to answer about 5 things."
Yes.
That doesn't sound like very good cover then.
Well,
Because,
the difficult thing is when you do it online, you don't have somebody questioning what you actually say and what you put down.
yeah, and they're questioning you for your own sake. They're not questioning you to try and catch you out, are they? They're questioning you to try and make sure you've actually got the right cover.
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, it's like going to, I would say, buying online, right, is like going to the doctor's. You sit in front of the doctor and he says, right, what's wrong with you now then? And you have to then try and explain what's wrong, right? When you're doing an online application, there is a series of questions, and it doesn't, if you can answer them, it doesn't lead into anything else. It doesn't generate any question marks around, well, that was a funny answer, right? Or, right, okay, you said you're working on houses, right? But it doesn't say, are those grade 1 listed houses? Because Burley House is a house, right? But virtually every insurer would run a mile if you said you were working on Burley, because but if it just says you're working on a house, you just tick it and say yes, and that's fine. And I've got numerous examples of that. Plus that generally everybody says on an application, or not everybody, but in my experience, when I say to them, how long have you had your policy with online? And it would be, 3 or 4 years. I said, have you updated any information? And they say, oh no, they just send me a renewal every year. Right? But you have a responsibility to update that information.
Yeah. Have you got more men now? Have you started doing lead welding?
Yeah, the number of times it says you're in the turnover band of up to 25,000, right? And I've got them where they're on 250,000.
Yeah.
You really may as well not have that policy.
Yeah.
In those circumstances, I won't take a client on unless I've spoken to them and gone through their details.
Yeah. So, give you a scenario now. Then,
yeah,
I want my insurance to be as cheap as humanly possible, right? So when you ask me the questions, how high do you work? And I know that I work on really high buildings, but I think, well, I ain't going to admit that because that's going to cost me a fortune. If I'm dishonest about the questions that you ask me and that you put together a policy that isn't based on the truthful scenario, the actual real condition of my company, what does that mean? How am I taking a big risk there?
Well, what you're doing is you're denying the insurer the full information. Insurance, the contract of insurance is known as one of utmost good faith, in that you have all of the information about your business and I have none of it. And I have to take everything that you tell me at face value.
Yeah.
Right? So if you tell me you're only working on 2-story houses, but you're actually working on 7-story multi-story buildings, right? I'm not being given the right information with which to rate your risk appropriately, right? And any claims, therefore, would be subject to the policy probably being voided for a deliberate withholding of material information.
Yeah.
Even if the claim hasn't been generated as a result of working on a multi-story thing, your insurer will still be able to turn around and say, actually, you know what? We wouldn't have taken you on as a client had you told us the correct details. And that's not just working at height. There's a set of declaration questions that I ask everybody. Right? They are, have you had any claims? Right? Have you had any accidents that you've been insured? Had you been insured, would have been a claim. Have you ever had an insurance policy cancelled? So due to non-payment, or where you've done something that's breached a policy condition, your insurer's thrown it out. Your new other insurers will want to know that. Yeah. Have you ever had any health and safety prohibition notices served on you? In other words, are you a good risk, or do you just flout the law?
Yeah.
Have you had any county court judgments? So insurers are taking into account what's known as the moral hazard, i.e. what sort of person you are, what sort of business it is, as much as they do the physical hazard. So if you are running a company and you aren't bothered about whether you're running up debts and stuff like that, then most insurers will steer clear of you, or you'll end up paying a lot more for it, right? Have you ever had a company that's gone into bankruptcy, been bankrupt, dissolved, gone into liquidation, gone into administration? All of those are indicators to an insurer that there is something amiss, right? And may well be, depending on how recent they are, be a factor as to whether they actually take you on as a client or not, right? Yeah. And the last one is any criminal convictions, right? Whether those, and some insurers ask for any, others are any that aren't spent and whatever. But if you don't declare things, right, you are leaving yourself wide open to spending your money on insurance, right? And it's just money thrown away.
Yeah.
You may as well stick it under your mattress.
Yeah.
Because your policy, and sure as eggs is eggs, when you have a claim, the loss adjuster, they're not trying to trip you up. All they're trying to do is get the fullest information as possible. And they will have a copy of your proposal form, and you probably won't, right? So they'll be asking you a lot of questions where you've answered already, and you probably can't remember what you put on. So that's why it's very important, right at the outset. I'd much rather have an argument with somebody right at the outset, right, than when there was a claim.
Yeah, of course.
If we can't see eye to eye, or they don't like the price, or they don't like the cover, that's absolutely fine, right? And I'd rather they went somewhere where they were more comfortable, right, than they don't tell me things and we have an argument later because the claim's been thrown out.
Yeah.
My job is to get the best cover at the best price that we can get using the agencies we deal with, right, for that client, to protect that client's interest.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about protection,
yeah,
if I'm a sole trader and I haven't got the right cover, and something does actually go wrong, something bad, I burn down a house or something.
Yep.
What's going to happen? What's going to be the next stage? Am I going to go to jail? Am I going to be? Is my house going to be taken away?
Don't get me wrong. If you are a sole trader, right, you are 100% liable for anything that you do. Right?
Yeah.
So if you take out an insurance policy, burn a house down, and you have voided your insurance policy because you haven't declared all the material facts, right, that claim will get thrown out. You are personally liable for that loss, and that could involve you having to sell your house.
Yeah.
Any asset you have is at risk as a sole trader.
It's so serious, isn't it? It's not even like car insurance where you might have to pay the other lady 10 grand because you crashed into her car. This is life-changing amounts of money, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be, absolutely can be life-changing amounts of money. Yeah. And it is, I can't stress how important it is that's the main reason why you should have public liability in place, is that it protects you as an individual while you're a sole trader, and while you're a limited company, it protects the assets of the limited company.
Yeah.
Right? And it's my job to get the information from you that allows me to get the best cover at the best price. I'm not going to be able to solve and beat absolutely every price out there, because if I was, then I'm not doing something wrong, but I'd just be very surprised. It's in the same way that if any roofer always won every job that he went for, he'd be thinking there's something wrong here. Am I underpricing or whatever? my success as an insurance broker working in the roofing and liability market is I treat everybody exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right? Whether you're a one-man band, whether you're a 10 million pound company, right? But it's just making sure that they're protected, and it's educating them about how their policy works and why they need the policy. Because
Yeah.
there's still a lot of roofers out there that don't have either the right cover or any cover at all.
Yeah.
That's the worrying side of it.
Yeah. Well, it is when you really think about what the ramifications are if something goes wrong.
Yep.
It's and I'm sure there's lads out there now that don't have it, and does their partner know about that?
Well,
And are the rest of their families aware that
yeah,
if it all goes wrong, the
right.
family home might be gone.
And
It's quite scary, really.
don't think it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
because it does. Because insurance companies can be big bad companies. So if I'm the insurance company who's insured a house on behalf of my householder, and they're having you as a contractor doing their roof, right, and you burn the house down, right, as an insurer of the household, the house, I'm going to hold you responsible and come after you.
Well, you're not going to reach in your pocket and get
No,
100 grand out to fix it.
certainly not. Insurance companies, sadly, insurance companies aren't charities; they're businesses, and
Yeah.
they have a responsibility to their shareholders to make sure they're doing their jobs right. And part of that is recovering losses from unfortunate contractors where things have happened.
Mm.
Mistakes happen, but that's why mistakes happen. That's why you have your insurance.
Yeah, exactly. It's that.
As long as you are reasonable, careful, and aware of the policy terms and conditions, right, you shouldn't have a problem. It's where you don't understand or aren't aware of your policy conditions. For example, the hot works conditions.
Yeah.
There's about 8 different conditions, right, that really are just good housekeeping.
Yeah.
Right? But if you don't follow those, right, you're in breach of your policy terms and conditions.
Yeah. And I presume you hand out those 8
Indeed,
items when
every
someone insures with you.
time, everybody that has hot works on their policy, when I send them their policy documents, the 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 hot works are on the front page of the letter that I send to them.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so critical, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't, because I wouldn't. It's difficult for me because I want to be able to sleep at night as well, right? And I don't want a roofer burning a house down and thinking that I haven't told them what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's part of my job.
So, with you having over 450 roofers on your books, then,
Yeah.
what would you say it is about the way you operate that means that everybody raves about you? Because I see loads of people recommending you.
Well, yeah, it does. My name does pop up every now and again on the site. I just believe that I'm a bit of a throwback to traditional insurance broking, in that I want to speak to all the clients. I treat them all well. I'm available pretty much anytime. Right? People ring me at 10 at night and 7 in the morning. And if I pick the phone up, I will help them. And we also, because we've got 450, we have a little bit of market clout. We get improved terms, or at least can have a damn good discussion with underwriters about why something is too expensive and why it should be cheaper. And the thing is, I won't just sit and accept somebody's first price. I will always try and negotiate when I think that price is unreasonable.
Yeah.
Right. At the moment, everybody's renewal tends to be going up 7 to 10%, but that's really an inflationary increase because of the increased cost of materials, and the increased cost of wages. And those are the two things that drive claims costs. So insurers, as soon as, if your material cost, everybody knows, every roofer knows material costs have gone up. Right. So if you're burning a house down, it's going to cost you 20% more than it did 3 years ago.
Exactly.
So that's why your insurance goes up.
Yeah.
And people often say to me, well, I haven't had any claims. Why has my policy gone up? And I'd say to that, I said, well, I don't know whether you've had any claims yet, because you could have a claim 2 years down the line from something that you've done. So the difference between motor insurance or property insurance is that that's fairly obvious when something's happened, and it's basically an instant claim, right? Whereas a liability claim can take up to 3 years to come through, possibly longer. Longer. It's because if you've done a roof and you put the wrong pitch on or whatever, and you get capillary action drawing water back up, and it causes damp, you may not know that for 2 years.
It might take a while, yeah.
It could take a while. So that's why when people say I haven't had any claims, I say, well, it's difficult because we don't know. So insurers always have to build in to their pricing that residual claims that may come through at some point.
Yeah.
And, that's why liability insurance, certainly for high risk liability, of which roofing is one, will never really come down.
Yeah. We're a high risk group of individuals, aren't we? You know, yes. Everything about it is there's a risk there, you know.
And if all the roofers said, right, we're all going to get together, we're all going to make sure every single person does the health and safety, does the risk management, complies with the policy, right? That would drive claims out of the business, out of the industry. And as a result, you would get market pressure, right, to drop rates.
Yeah.
Right? The trouble is, you're always going to get somebody who says, well, if I don't do that, I'll be cheaper than them, so I'll quote less, and they pick business up. Right?
Yeah.
Insurance shouldn't be about the price of your work, right? Is going up because you've got insurance. Right? I know it will be looked at that as because it's a business cost. I understand that, but it is so much more than a business cost.
Yeah,
it's protecting your business. You buy in protection, right? Don't really try and think of it as a business cost. Because if you do that, it'll drive you mad, because hopefully it's something you never use.
Well, this is it. It's like it's all good and well it being 300 quid cheaper because you haven't given all the details, but the only time you're ever going to need that insurance is if something goes wrong. And at that point, when it does go wrong and you saved yourself 300 quid, you're going to lose your house. You know,
you want to make sure it's right when you need it.
It's quite frightening, really, and I'm sure people do it. It's
that's why all the guys who say they've got risk management and health and safety and whatever need to make sure they actually have that in place. Because if the insurer is basing their pricing on the fact that they said they've got health and safety and risk management in place, and it turns out they don't, right? And come a claim, there's going to be questions asked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for highlighting a few bits and bobs.
Right.
I think it's useful just for people to understand it a bit better. And maybe we could do another one at some point as well, just talking about certain types of scenarios and risks.
Yes.
I think that might be a good idea.
Or if any of the guys have any questions, I have no problem answering questions. People can message me, ring me. I really don't mind. And I'm just sad that I sit and talk about insurance all day. But I don't really mind. It's what I do.
Yeah, you're passionate about it and you're good at it, so I can understand it.
Yeah, and I enjoy working with you at Master Roofers, because part of what I'm trying to do and what you're trying to do is educate the roofers into I don't necessarily want everybody to come to me for their insurance, right? I'd like to think that everybody can have a fair crack at a whip, right? There are other guys out there, there are other brokers out there, there are other insurers that people have relationships with, right? And insurance quite often is considered to be a relationship thing. You feel comfortable with somebody, and therefore you give them more information, and you'll get better deals, right? That's what it's all about. I try and treat all of my customers and clients as like people that I would be happy to sit and have a chat with.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. But I always want them to feel as though they understand more about their policy once they've had a conversation than they did beforehand.
Yeah. It definitely opened my eyes because I insured with you, obviously, when I was a contractor, and just chatting to you on the phone, it was like, it just brought it to light a little bit, because I think when I'd just been insuring my car, you know, and I told them how many miles I did a year and that I parked it off the road, and you know, it's a small handful of questions, and I presumed it would be the same with public liability. And you do understand once you've chatted to someone that really knows what they're talking about. And this is, I think, the benefit of what you offer over a lot of insurance companies is you're not a website, you're not a page with lots of sliders. You're actually a human being that cares about the people that are actually your customers. So that's why you get recommended, I think, mostly.
And I genuinely do care, and I try my very best. And there are some times where it's just impossible because the insurers say no, right? And that's a number of factors, mainly around those declaration questions, where the answers just make it impossible for an insurer to accept a risk.
Yeah,
right? That's just unfortunate circumstances. I will always try, and I'll go as far as I dare to push an insurer to get to let them to accept a risk at a reasonable price. That's
well, thanks very much for the chat.
No worries.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
All right, nice to speak to you, Stuart.
All right. See you later.
Okay.